This is a very quick, tiny update on the GC, and I just stepped on my tools. Just because I ran into an issue that I think will be worth like having as a separate video in case someone is running into the same thing, and it'll just be easier to search this up. So previously, I did the brake pads and rotors on all 4 corners. And that was about, I can't even remember now, I think like 3 months, maybe more. And the car never actually left the garage. So, as you can see here, these were the new rotors. And brake pads are on the side, but let me get the light on. You can see I have everything off this. So, here's the issue. Like I said, I replaced everything on this car, but I never really drove it because engine's over here. This car doesn't actually run right now, so it's been right here since I changed it. So these are literally brand new. It got some rust on it from just sitting, but they have never actually been used. And so 2 days ago, I actually finally wanted to move this car, so I wanted to roll it out of the garage, and I figured out that it's not even moving. The car was not able to move only after this brake change, because other than that, I didn't do anything to this. To give you an example of what's going on, so wheels on, these are all tightened. I didn't really torque it, but I kind of just used my impact and got it pretty tight. And you can see now, if I try to pull it, I can't, it doesn't move at all. Like no matter how hard I actually try, it's not going to move. Now that's basically the issue. And so when I'm trying to roll the car out, both back wheels actually just don't roll and the car doesn't move. The wheel is loose, so it's not actually tightened on. If I spin it, it moves. So there you go. Now I'm just gonna go through like the whole process of elimination I went through. If you want to just skip to like the solutions, go ahead, like forward the video. But I just want to give like an overview of what I did, just so if you're having the same issue, you can kind of watch the whole thing and see if your situation is exactly like mine, and that way you can know if any of the solutions help. What happened was I jacked up the car and I manually with my hand rotated both front wheels and they were spinning fine. Okay, came to the back and I couldn't move the wheels. Right away, I kind of decided that fronts are fine, backside's the issue. Next thing I did was literally just play around with the handbrake inside because I thought that was just the more obvious answer, and it was fine. So first solution, if your handbrake's on, that might be the problem. Anyway, next thing, I thought maybe the wheel was the issue. It's pretty simple, but like what happened for me, I actually changed my wheel the same time, or around the same time I changed the brakes. And I actually, so this car is kind of being like an off-road car, so I had put bigger wheels on it and never actually drove. And so I was thinking maybe the bigger size for some reason is hitting something. So first thing you want to check if your wheel, if it's hitting something. And for me it wasn't, so that's out of the question. But you can check if maybe it's hitting the strut because the tire usually comes up to here, or for some reason hitting any of the suspension parts. So just check that first. That was not the issue for me, but what I realized after I took off the wheel, as you can see, I can actually move it. So when the wheel was on, it wouldn't even move that much. It's pretty tight, obviously, because it's connected to the diff and everything, but it does move. So it's not broken. When I did my own research online, there were actually people who had like a similar problem, and most of them, I think what happened was that their brake pads were so new that the thickness was actually like grabbing onto the rotor and basically felt like the brake was actually being pressed. So I thought that might be the issue, and for me it wasn't. As you can see, I took off the caliper and then I bolted back the wheel on with the rotor still on and the caliper off, and I still had the same issue. The wheel wouldn't spin once it was fully bolted on. Finally, knowing that the brake caliper, brake pads, and the wheel wasn't the issue, I basically decided that this was probably the issue. With a caliper, I literally measured all the lengths on the side and see if they basically line up with all the steps here. And got my little diagram here, and you can see, well, barely see. The distance from the inner side of the rotor all the way out here, pretty much to the highest point, was about 60.4. Which, just to make more sense, is from the bottom where it touches this part all the way up to this point, which is the highest point. And so again, it's from here to right under this little part here, so it goes underneath. And this thing was like 0.5 millimeter smaller. It's hard to see, but it's all rusty and corroded in there, and so it's not actually that flat. So at some points It does fit, some points it's too small. My guess is that this point that you can see, if anything does touch, it's this thing right here. What I'm gonna try to do is basically file or sand this part down. I'm gonna go really slowly and just go little by little at a time until hopefully it fits. The rotor is back in, ground down, and actually honestly I don't know how much less I went, but I just know that I needed at least 1/2 millimeter, so I think I did long enough to actually get it down there. Wheel's completely tightened on as much as I would do when putting on the wheel, and now it still doesn't work. Actually it's better, look at that, it's moving now. I could not move it like that before, but it's still tighter than without it tightened, so there's definitely still some space to make up, and I think it can get better than this, but I think it's fine for the most part. When I use two hands, it's a lot easier if I leave it at this point, and if it's still touching a little bit, I think once the car is actually driving and spins a bit, it will correct itself at some point, because it'll just eat off whatever is actually touching, and it should fix itself, and I don't think it's a big deal if I let that happen. On the other side, I'm finally done. You can see it's finally moving. I think it's a little tight on this side still. I probably should have kept going. I'm just hoping it'll be enough to still push the car. If not, I'll just have to do the same thing. As you can see, the car is not rolling. And this is the first time this thing has seen sunlight in like almost a year. And the whole point of taking it out, because I wanted to clean all this up. And I might rearrange the cars to see what cars are going inside for the winter. So, main thing, it was so dusty in here. And every time I got on the floor to look under the car, just a bunch of dust would just come off the floor. So, this definitely has to be cleaned. But at least now, both the wheels are good. I think it's still touching because the car doesn't move as fast as I think it could, but actually it was better because I was just pushing the car by myself. So it slowed it down just a bit. But there you go. Brake rotors were the problem, and now it's good.